So can you tell me why it doesn't make sense? I mean, or validate me. But I'm pretty sure I'm just wrong. I just want to know, how am I wrong? Why is this not possible? Because it sounds like it shouldn't be possible.
Ladies, gentlemen, and those with the good sense to do away with the whole notion, I welcome you to the premier audio medium for all your Fazbear entertainment needs. The Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. Note, FFPP is not responsible for any loss of appetite, disinterest, dismemberment, or other legally classified statuses. So strap in and enjoy.
Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. I'm your host with the toast, Rye Toast, here to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's like we always do. And we've got some more teasers to talk about. I wasn't ready to talk about Secret of the Mimic yet. I kind of figured we'd save it until like the week before, FNAF reference, but we got a lot of teasers in the past like week or so, and I kind of just wanted to talk about them. There's not that much to talk about, so this episode will likely majority be questions, but I wanted to bring it up while they are fresh, and we did get a whole bunch of them. Starting off with probably the most meaningful one, the Stay Up Latte teaser that we got on the Steel Wool YouTube account. So it's a short little video that is frankly a little creepy, but it seems to be a Murray Co. commercial for a Edwin Murray made coffee maker that I think is pretty clearly trying to say that the Mimic One program is within the coffee maker. So again, go watch the full commercial if you want the full context, but it's these two people and they're like, oh, you need to stay up latte with this Murray Co. Coffee maker. It makes you the perfect cup. And then it zooms in on the coffee maker and it's like, something along the lines of, I'm always watching. I know what you want more than you do, or something like that. It's a really interesting teaser. There's some screenshots that we'll touch on that showcase some hard to see but screenshots from the game images. I have my thoughts on what those are, and we will get to them, and I'm really excited about what I think they are, but I want to talk about this teaser as a whole first. If the Mimic is in this coffee pot, we need to address it, right? Because, again, the Mimic as a character is a specific iteration of the Mimic One program within an endoskeleton that can change its form to fit any costume. That's the Mimic. But if the Mimic One program is in this coffee pot, that goes pretty much directly against the timeline of the books that they establish in the story The Mimic. So in that story, Edwin even mentions like, hey, this Mimic One program is really impressive. I might be able to use it for future endeavors and make my business even more successful. Well, I guess successful at all, because by that point in the book, he doesn't really have a successful business anymore. Regardless, as far as I'm aware, David dies before he's ever able to do that. Like in the books, he makes the mimics primarily to babysit and play with his son David, and David dies due to his own negligence. And then like a couple weeks later, he sees the mimic mimicking David and beats the hell out of it. So I don't see a spot in this timeline for Edwin to be using the Mimic to essentially make coffee pots, right? Like do business with it. Like you could argue that we do have this long stretch of time where we don't know what Edwin was up to, but the last time, like the two bookends that we see Edwin interact with the Mimic, it's the end of the story, The Mimic, where he beats the living hell out of the endoskeleton, and it's in the Storyteller, where something that reminds him of the Mimic sends him into a PTSD-like panic attack. So it doesn't seem like he likes the Mimic or the Mimic One program very much at all. So I don't see a time in this timeline that the books have established where Edwin would be using the Mimic One program within coffee pots and likely other things like that vacuum that we see a billboard of in Five Laps at Freddy's that originally gets mentioned in the books. In the books, the Mimic One program is made after the vacuum, but I wonder if this timeline they're establishing, the vacuum is going to have the Mimic One program inside of it. I wouldn't doubt if that's one of the upcoming teasers we see. But again, this would go against, as far as I'm aware, the timeline of the books. Now, hold your horses. I'm not about to put a note at the end of this rant and be like, and that's why the books are fully uncanon and throw them all out. I want to be very clear. even if this is a completely different timeline of the books, I'm not saying to throw out all the evidence the books have given us. The books have given us a lot of information about Edwin Murray, his family dynamic, the creation of the Mimic, and the collection of the Mimic, including how the Mimic works, and some things Fazbear has done with the Mimic 1 program. All of these very important pieces of information we don't have in-game yet. Like I have been saying, at least for my own sake, I'm going to assume everything that these books have told us so far is true, because it doesn't directly contradict very much in the games. If anything at all, at least those sections of what I've mentioned. So when something in the games comes out that goes against something in the books, I'm not going to throw out what the books have suggested. Instead, I'm going to insert it where it overlaps and disregard the information from the books that contradicts it. So for instance, if these teasers and eventually Secret of the Mimic is going to make the case that Edwin actually originally made the Mimic 1 program to put into his technology so it was smarter, the best on the market, and that's why he was so successful, and then he later reworked the Mimic 1 program into something that babysat his son, totally plausible. It goes against what the books say, but it still slots into the timeline fairly seamlessly. Or even if he originally made that Mimic, even if he made the Mimic 1 program for David, but David survived a couple extra years, and he did get to do the thing he mentioned, where he reworked the Mimic 1 program into something he could sell, and then he made some more money that way, and then David dies. Both of those are completely plausible, and that's where argumentation and theorizing is going to happen. But obviously we're going to get more information until, in Secret of the Mimic, and likely in upcoming teasers. So I don't mean to point out this discrepancy to discredit the books or any of the information they've provided. Rather, if these teasers are telling us that Edwin was using the Mimic 1 program for monetary gain in his products, then that is telling us that in the game's timeline, there are differences from the books. Not to say everything from the books is wrong, but that is a direct difference. And if it is a direct difference, it needs to be accounted for. But obviously, I'm excited to see what other differences there are going to be. Like they said in the Dawko interview, Evan Lampy said in the Dawko interview, if you've read the books, you don't know the full story. Likely, I would assume that means there are some subtle differences, and also there's a lot more to the story we haven't seen yet. So I'm excited to see what the subtle differences are, what we haven't seen yet, and be able to piece together this timeline with information from the games and information from the books. Super, super excited. So that being said, that was the teaser, right? The meat of the teaser, not super important. The important thing is that Murray Co. produced a coffee pot that had the Mimic 1 program inside of it. That is the important thing. And they know that. They know that the coffee pot itself isn't the important part. This is their subtle way of telling us that. Also, this has to be a Desolate Hope reference, right? Surely this is a Desolate Hope reference. A sentient coffee pot with arms? Come on, Scott, you're not slick. Anyway, we got a lot of images as well. And like I mentioned, 2 of them are in the teaser itself. There's 2 moments where there's an image overlaid and very hard to see on the video itself. And the first one was a bit confusing, but with the second one in context, I think I know what both of these, and likely what the future ones are going to be. If you remember in the lead up to Security Breach, there was the, I think it was Freddy on Tour or Fazbear and Friends, whatever the bits that came out. And there was those cool images that we had to piece together. I think we're doing that again, right? I think in this, we're doing it again, where we have these 2 screenshots. I'm going to put them up right here if I remember. If I don't, yell at me. I don't know. Go pull up the video yourself. But there's these 2 shots. And the second one, you get a really good glimpse of because there's nothing else on screen. And it's this FNAF 1 angle of Dolly, the nurse animatronic that we'll talk about in a little bit. And something else that looks like maybe lights, could be mimic eyes, hard to tell, but it's this downward angle of Dolly looking up into a camera. This is a FNAF 1 angle. I think Chica does this exact angle outside of the bathrooms. This is a FNAF 1 angle, which is awesome. Because when we look at the second image, half of this seems intelligible to me. It's this right half Where to me, it looks like we're seeing an above shot of a desk looking out over something and a chair at that desk. What it's looking out over, hard to tell. It looks like maybe a scrapper, maybe just some warehouse parts, maybe an exterior entrance, I don't know. But the right half, to me, it looks like a desk with a chair that's like off to the side. So when I see that, that doesn't make a lot of sense. When I pair it with Dolly, both of these are overhead shots. I think this is telling us that at least at some point in Secret of the Mimic, we are going to be doing a traditional FNAF camera section. Like a sit and survive, watch your cameras, close your doors style section. Something that I think a lot of us were really hoping for. I've been the longest proponent that Security Breach should have had this. They had things that approached it, right? Where you're in a room as Gregory and you have to run to the doors and manually shut them. And that's like a cool concept, and it gets close to that traditional FNAF, but it doesn't really, right? Like you barely use the cameras, and even when you do, it just feels so very different because it's less about, resource management, which is where FNAF strives, and it's more about like positioning yourself in the right place and trying to use these very poorly functioning cameras. And I've always said that it's insane to me that Security Breach doesn't have an extra mode that is a traditional sit and survive FNAF styled minigame, essentially, like a custom night. Something that I think would be an incredibly easy layup, even today, to just update the game and add, and would have, if it launched with it, would have made a whole lot of fans a whole lot kinder to Security Breach's reception, right? The idea that like, oh, here's this brand new game with all these brand new modes, but for the true blue veteran fans who don't really love that kind of stuff that much, there is still an extra mode where you get to play, a sit and survive camera survival game. And, I always thought it would be so cool if like, as you progress through the game and you see new areas and the animatronics deteriorate, you unlock new areas to do this sit and survive in and new variants of the animatronics. Like the difference between Roxy as one of the animatronics and Shattered Roxy, or adding Burn Trap down the line, and being able to play the sit and survive in the old FNAF 6 pizzeria, right? It would have been, I think, frankly, a pretty easy layup because you already have made all the environments. Just position them and render them in cool locations, make some cameras, and just make it a mode. It seems so like such a no-brainer to include something like that. Because like, as we know from the early developments of this franchise, to make a FNAF 1 style game is not a tall order. Like, I'm no game developer, but a lot of people I've heard have said, like, a great way to practice making fan games is just make something that works like FNAF 1, because it's fairly simplistic to do. The strength of FNAF 1 has never been its intricacies in its programming. It was in the vibe, the mood, and the rendering. That's hard to learn, and that's hard to get right. But, like, Steelwool is a whole-ass company. Obviously, they know how to do that. And so it still blows my mind that to this day, in how many updates and how much stuff they've added, even with Ruin, they never once added that camera mode. It seems like such a no-brainer to me. But all this to say, rant aside, I think these two screenshots are glimpses of some sort of camera mode in Secret of the Mimic. Some sort of sit and survive, hear your cameras, protect yourself for some time. We've seen offices in the trailer. We know they exist. So when I look at these two look like really faded out camera shots. I wonder if we're going to be getting more Edwin Murray commercial teasers, and in those teasers, more camera shots, to the point where we might be able to recreate the full camera section with all of these different screenshots that we get, and they'll be hard to see, they'll be blurry, but we'll know it's in there, and when we get in game, it'll be like, this is it, this is what they've been teasing. That would be awesome. I think that would be such an amazing reveal, and please make it accessible from the main menu. That'd be all, especially after you get there in game, because that would just be a fun option to be able to boot up the Secret of the Mimic custom night, right? So that's the Stay Up Latte teaser. But we did also get some other images that I haven't directly talked about on the channel, and they're from the hashtag Mimic Mondays that Steelwool has been doing, where they post some sort of image related to Secret of the Mimic. Now, they started with this Murray's Costume Manor order form. I'm just going to read it out real quick. This order form is your receipt. It guarantees that the costumes specified below are being manufactured for you. Present this order form to the front desk 3 months after your initial order date to receive your costumes. And that's order date, pickup date, purchaser's name, body type, quantity, requested materials, requested details, special functions, 2 times the original fee. So this seems like the thing that Fazbear contracted Murray to do. It seems, to me, looking at this, it's like, it's less that Fazbear contracted Edwin Murray, and it's more so that it seems to me that they just ordered his services. It's just like, hey, there's someone who makes animatronics, we can just order it from him, you know? So looking at this, it doesn't tell us a whole lot, but it does pretty much solidly confirm that MCM is Murray's Costume Manor, something that we pretty much was on lock. I think was also confirmed in the interview. But I think this came out before the interview. Don't super remember the timeline. But it's fun. And I like seeing this now because this doesn't have a lot of lore on it. But any filled out ones we could find in game will. Imagine we find one of these that specifies like Spring Bonnie. That would be insane. And it would give us a definitive date on when it was made, who made it, and why. You know, like, that would be massive. So this paper and this image doesn't hold lore, and it doesn't hold much lore, and obviously, like, it's a teaser for a game that isn't out yet. But if there are filled out versions of, it's like the promise of lore. It's like somebody saying, hey, there could be lore here, wait until the game comes out, and that's awesome. Now we got this image as well. Watch your hands, limbs replaced at employee's expense. Couple things. One, in the books at least, by the time Murray is working for Fazbear in this big factory, he's the only employee, which is a little strange why there is like so much branding for other employees to be safe. So that's something that, again, maybe this is a discrepancy from the book. Maybe this is during the prime of Edwin Murray's career. You know, we know there was a stretch in between where he was trying to find his feet after the Mimic died and before he goes back to Fazbear. We don't know what that was like. Maybe this is part of it. It's hard to tell. I do like the fan theory that this is our main character, or at least the fact that we're going to be losing a hand in Secret of the Mimic, which I think would be awesome. I think that would be really big step up for FNAF as a franchise. It wouldn't need to be like this huge graphic scene. Like, we're not talking Outlast where like the like weird ass doctor holds your hand down, like plucks off your finger or whatever the hell, but just like something that shows there are stakes, something that shows these animatronics are, you know, out to get you more than just like a 2-second scream in your face and cut to black. Or at least like there are consequences, you know, like maybe this shows us that if we don't do things correctly, it gives us a consequence that we have to work around and live with. That'd be interesting, especially since it's a VR game, right? Imagine if you're playing the whole game with 2 hands, and in one of the secret final boss fights, it starts with you losing a hand. And now this whole game, you've been able to maneuver with 2 hands, but now you've got the 1, and you've got to start using 1 for the boss fight. That'd be really sick. That'd be awesome. Is that going to happen? Who knows? Because, like, this game needs to function without VR, and that feels like a very VR exclusive cool thing. So who knows? And then finally, we just yesterday, or I guess 2 days ago, as of posting this, because I'm recording this at like 11 p.m. on Tuesday, I had a busy weekend. Actually, it was a very amazing busy weekend. I was honored to co-host a FNAF 21 Questions panel at Philly Fan Expo with All Tab Cozy Horror. Such a fun time. Anyone who was there, y'all were real ones. It was surreal to be able to do something like that, and I want to do more in the future, so we'll see. But that was insane and super grateful. But because of that, very busy weekend. So we're catching up, but it's okay. We got this image on Monday of Dolly the nurse as not a horrifying monstrosity. And this elephant character, oh my broken bits, will take care of them. So this does confirm that Dolly is a nurse. There was a little bit of ambiguity because like there wasn't like the traditional Red Cross or whatever. Could have been a waitress, but this seems pretty pretty solid confirmation. Like Dolly is a nurse type character. Interestingly, working on another animatronic. So I don't know if that's just for a cute poster, or I wonder if Dolly is like an animatronic fixer, like she is a nurse for animatronics. Could be possible. I think it is notable that in this art, she has that backpack attached to her arms. I mentioned that this could be a sign that she's pneumatically powered, like increasing and decreasing pressure to bend her limbs. But the fact that she has it in character art, to me, I wonder if that's saying, no, this is a part of her character, not just her functions, right? Because they're made more characterized because of it. Still could be pneumatic, because looking at the elephant, there's wires inside of him. So it still could be, this is the mechanics of the character. But it could, I wonder, as a nurse, like, if on the palm of her hand, she might have, like, a hole to spray out whatever's in her backpack. Fuck, maybe she's the reagent. For my Escape the Pizzaplex readers, there was a, or I guess for the people who didn't read it, there was a staff bot retrofitted with a chemical backpack and nozzles on its arm, and nozzles forearms, I think, that would like spray a chemical and knock out Cassie. I wonder if Dolly is going to be doing the same thing. You know, maybe that was a teaser. Who knows? That'd be crazy. That's all we've got in the sense of teasers so far. We're still, what day is it? As of recording it, it's the 20th, but we have 1, 2, 3, like about a little less than 4 weeks until Secret of the Mimic comes out. So we got plenty of time for more teasers and more just cool stuff being shown off. I think Dawko has a charity live stream coming up. And if so, you know, maybe we'll get something there. If not, cool, whatever. It's still a cool charity live stream. Speaking of live streams, don't forget, I do those Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday at 9 p.m. EST every single week. Speaking of, this is going out on Wednesday. Great opportunity. Tonight, I'm going to be doing another Among Us collab. I'm doing another one next week, so there's 3 total. Tonight's is going to be myself. Obviously. Yes, I'm in tonight's collab. Crazy revelation, am I right? Let me pull up the group chat. Yes, tonight's, you know, as of recording this 11 p.m., people might cancel. Totally fine. Don't get mad at them if they do. But it's myself, Ali Slater, Ash from GT Live, Tom from Game Theory, Scylla Aria, Honey Bunny, ID's Fantasy, She's Always Nervous, Dan Seibert, you know, head editor Dan, but also now head of Lorify. A whole bunch of people who I've been doing a lot of streams with who are really cool. And you should be there. You should be there for all the streams. But be there tonight. Yippee. Anyway, we're going to move on to questions because that's about all I can yap about for the teasers we've gotten so far. So if you have questions you want answered on the podcast, feel free to send them into Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. That is in the description to copy and paste because it's a pain to type out. But our first question comes from, and I've decided I don't want short episodes anymore. So I'm going to pull up like way more questions than I need, and I'm just going to go until we're past 45 minutes, and then I'll save the rest for the next one. I'm just going to have a huge list of questions that I'll just get to. So I've decided I don't want any more short episodes. It feels weird to have a podcast that I want to be 45 minutes, and sometimes it's 28 minutes. That's just barely more than a video at that point. So I'm no longer going to run out of questions. We're just going to go until 45 minutes. So we're at like 22 minutes-ish now. So get ready for 23 minutes of questions. And one last note before we start. GamerSupps. Use my code RIGHTTOAST, not for 10% off. This week only until Friday at 3 p.m. It's why I'm saying it right now, because by the time the video goes live, it's not really going to be active anymore. Instead of 10% off, GamerSupps is doing free shipping. Now, depending on where you live, that could be a better deal for a lot of people in like the opposite end of the world, because GamerSupps is a US company. That definitely be better than 10% off. I've heard a lot of people, especially like fans in Australia, who talk about like, oh, I would love to try GamerSupps, but the shipping is crazy, right? So now's your chance. You got, as of today, like 2.5 days. Code RIGHTTOAST, you'll get free shipping worldwide. So go get it while you can. And also, I'm pretty sure, you know, if double check when you do it, When you do free samples with GamerSupps, you can only do it once per household ever. So if you haven't done a free sample with GamerSupps yet, I'm pretty sure the free shipping code also applies to free samples. The way free samples work with GamerSupps is you can order it to your house, get them for free, and you just pay for shipping. So with this code, you're not paying anything. You're just going to get free shit to your door. If you haven't tried GamerSupps yet, I'm pretty sure you can just get it for free for the next 3 days using code RYTOAST to get free shipping. And if you have tried GamerSupps and you like GamerSupps and you live in, like, I don't know, Belarus, I think they ship there. I don't know shipping, dude. I'm a dumb, ignorant American. I don't know geography. But if you live in a place where shipping is awful for you, now's your chance to stock up, you know? Because I've been working with them for like a year and a half. This is the second time I've ever known them to do this. So this isn't a common thing. So get it while the getting's good. Has it been a year and a half? Or like coming on a year? I either started working with them past September or a September and a half ago. No, it's got to be like 7 months. I think I just lied. Anyway, our first question comes from Zahar. They, them. The logbook and Didophobia point to Mike being the player of FNAF 4, as well as the private room and sister location. But the Ultimate Guide and the Encyclopedia say that we play as Dave. Is it a retcon? What do you think? Thank you for your question. FNAF 4 is one of those games that, like, at the same time, is immediately understandable and horribly complex and uninterpretable. And what I mean by that is, like, on the surface, it's immediately clear we are playing as a child having nightmares. Immediately that's clear. But the more you dig into it, the less clear it becomes. Like you mentioned, Didophobia. Is any of this real? Is this a test chamber that we're inside of? Maybe, maybe not. But then you look at the character encyclopedia in FNAF, and it pretty directly states that this is the crying child having nightmares after an experience at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. So, like, which is it? I want to say straight up, there's not a definitive answer. This is definitely a theory answer more than anything. It's how you interpret information. It's how you connect dots. For me personally, I think the most understandable interpretation of FNAF 4 is it's a little bit of both. Essentially, I think that the testing chambers William creates a la Didophobia were based off of nightmares that the crying child was already having. So after the bite of 83, he creates the test chambers, right? So crying child already having nightmares similar to this. Bite of 83 happens. William brings the kid back to the house and tries to wake him up. Okay, maybe a horrible nightmare will do it. Creates the testing chambers, does nightmare testing chambers on the crying child, doesn't work. He dies. Bury him in the backyard, essentially. Then, I think, as punishment, and also to continue the experiments, William Afton just throws Michael in those chambers and just locks the key. He's going to be in those doing Didophobia, right? Like Didophobia, I'm forgetting his name. Raul? Runner? Richie? It's something R. But the kid in Didophobia, Rory? I think it's Rory. The kid in Didophobia is in there for like 16 years because it's just automatic. So I think William essentially locks Michael in there, and he's like, studying his reactions, but he's just trying to see what happens to a human if they're constantly having horrific nightmares with no reprieve. What happens, So Michael's in there. So is that the FNAF 4 gameplay? No. I think, because there's one unexplainable thing about FNAF 4 that you could write off as a help wanted inaccuracy, right? That these are indie games in universe. But I don't think you have to. I think the FNAF 4 gameplay we've played is the nightmares Michael Afton has after the chambers, because of the FNAF 1 phone call that plays backwards on one of the nights in FNAF 4. Right, so if that phone call plays during the night, this is something in the memory of the player. So I think Michael is eventually released from the nightmare chambers of FNAF 4, but he still has those recurring nightmares, even though they're just on his own now. These are just nightmares that happen to him, which then explains why it changes to Fredbear and eventually Nightmare Fredbear. Or rather, Nightmare Fredbear and then eventually Nightmare. because these are now nightmares that are happening to him, not just a testing facility. So that being said, I think after the events of FNAF 1, when Michael survives those, he begins having recurring nightmares that are reminiscent of those nightmare testing chambers, which is a really convoluted way to say it's nightmares from Michael Afton. But like, I think it's nightmares of Michael Afton from his experiences going through a Didophobia-like testing chamber. Really roundabout way of saying it. Is that canon? Who knows? You know, it's my interpretation of it. Like I said, I think FNAF 4 is very interpretational. That's how I interpret it. So my answer definitively to you, what do you think? Thank you for your question. Our next question comes from Jamichael He Him. Okay, so there's a very niche fact that's been kind of forgotten in FNAF lore I wanted to bring back up, because we may have the information to solve it now. In Ultimate Custom Night, one of the Toy Chica cutscenes has her daydreaming over a wolf guy character. Her plan is to get him by luring him with a dead dog. The mention that character, or the method that Chica was lured with by Afton. Susie, but yeah. Up until this point, there was no mention of a wolf character in FNAF lore, so a lot of people were confused about him being included in such a lore-significant cutscene. Knowing now about the existence of Roxy, could that moment have any significance now? I don't expect this character to ever come back, obviously, but it seems too specific a detail to ignore. Thank you for your question, Jamichael. I want to say out the gate, I don't think it's Roxy. I don't think that's the wolf connection. To me, when I see that wolf character there, I see two possible explanations. One, it may be a reference to the Twisted Ones animatronic, which did have a wolf character. Could be possible, right? Like, that is an option. However, I think at the time, it was just kind of this time where Scott was making extra costumes, right? Like, that's where we get the mediocre melodies, that's where we get all these new characters. So I think it may have been one of those that didn't get delved up upon. I would not doubt, I'll bet you money, and this is the second possibility. I think this is a Scott Bookman's bluff. I think this is a character he didn't have any plans for, but he put it there in case he'd have plans for it in the future. And wouldn't you know it, my hair part is bothering me. Wouldn't you know it, the very next game we're about to play in about 4 weeks features a manor filled with costumes. Murray's costume manor, if you will. I would bet dollars to donuts that we will see a wolf-like character very similar to this character in the Toy Chica cutscene in Murray's costume manor. I bet we'll see a lot of FNAF adjacent characters. Maybe I would love to see if like all the mediocre melodies are in there. That'd be awesome. But I wouldn't doubt if a wolf-like character is in there. And if so, and it looks similar to this cutscene, I think that's just more evidence that Edwin Murray's inventions crossed over into Fazbear more than we realize. But, we'll get there when we get there. As of now, I don't think it's an important character, and I don't think it's related to Roxy. I think it's valid to make that in, like, theory and connection, but I don't think there's much evidence to support that. But thank you for your question. Our next question comes from Trey, any all. Just wanted to know what you're most excited for about the Nintendo Switch 2. I'm personally really excited for high frame rate and mouse controls. Thank you for your question. This is a selfish one because I just want to talk about Nintendo Switch 2. I'm so excited. It comes out the week before Secret of the Mimic, so it's like June is such a big month for me, man. For me, like any other Nintendo console, it's the games. It's always going to be down to the games. It's the only reason I keep buying Nintendos because their games are just, you can't get a Nintendo game outside of a Nintendo console except for like Astrobot, which isn't a Nintendo game, but it feels like it. But I don't have a PS5, so, And the fact that Mario Kart World is a launch title, hell yes, brother. Mario Kart 8, I'm a kart racing fan. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, my most played game on the Switch. Not my favorite, but it's in my top 5. Mario Kart World, it's more Mario Kart. I'm excited. Prime 4, Metroid Prime is in my top 5 games of all time. Metroid Prime is an amazing game, and the remaster just elevated it. Seeing Metroid Prime 4 footage that we've already gotten, Metroid Prime 4 is probably going to also join Metroid Prime Remastered as a top 10 game of all time. So I cannot wait for that. That's probably my most anticipated game. But like the fact that of the like 3 major games that have been announced as like, these are our first parties, 2 of them are going to be my favorite Switch 2 games, I could be more excited. And frankly, one of the things I'm most excited for is GameCube coming to NSL. Because GameCube is like my nostalgia console. I grew up with GameCube. I grew up with the games on it. Like that was like my peak, like elementary to middle school, I think. I don't remember the exact years. I'm really bad with years. But like that was like when I first started playing video games, it was the PlayStation 1 and then the GameCube. And the GameCube was like, that was my console, man. So like Zelda Wind Waker. Zelda Wind Waker is my favorite Zelda game of all time, and I can finally play it on a Switch. The closest I've gotten is that I put an emulation of it on my Steam Deck. So it's going to be nice to be able to officially play it on a Switch. Nintendo, you're getting a lot of shit for overpricing your games, and it's, deserved a little bit. But Nintendo, you could. Look at me, Miyamoto. Okay? Doug Bowser even. I'll take anyone. You could just re-release Wind Waker HD, the port from Wii U. Just re-release it. Don't change a thing. Just re-release it on the Switch 2. I would buy it for $100 day one. I need it. I don't want to have to break up my Wii U to play the better version of Wind Waker. But hey, at least I get to play it on Switch. And oh my god, I almost forgot Kirby Air Ride. Kirby Air Ride is like one of my favorite GameCube games of all time. It's like top 25 games of all time. And we're getting a sequel to it sometime this year, apparently. Oh, I'm eating so good. It's the games. It always has been the games. I'm eating so good. Speaking of, don't forget, like I said about the whole streaming thing, as long as the people in line around me are comfortable about it, I am going to, the Best Buy I'm getting my pre-order at said they're doing a midnight release. So as long as the people nearby me are okay with it, I am going to live stream myself in line getting the Switch 2. And then also, I'm going to end a stream, go home, and then at like 1 a.m., boot up this, once like the Switch 2 is set up and installed and all that, I'm just going to do a Mario Kart World stream at like 1 a.m. June 5th, the day the Switch launches. I'm going to try to be one of the earliest Mario Kart World streamers possible. I'm sure with time zones, there's going to be someone earlier, but I'm going to try to be right there. Anyway, twitch.tv/RightToastYT. Don't forget about it. Anyway, thank you for your question, Trey. Our next question comes from Irma Gurdon, he, him. So I'm watching FNAF's new Midnight Motorist video from a few weeks ago, and I had a thought. Is there an argument that he had a rough day today is referring to the bike? Like, is that a possibility? I mean, it's probably not. It sounds like it would be a clever twist thing, but it also sounds insane. I'm not well versed enough in FNAF lore to know why it doesn't make sense. So can you tell me why it doesn't make sense? I mean, or validate me. But I'm pretty sure I'm just wrong. I just want to know, how am I wrong? Why is this not possible? Because it sounds like it shouldn't be possible. Thank you for your question, Irma Gurdon. So I assume by the bite, you mean the bite of 83. It depends on... It is possible depending on how you interpret Midnight Motorist and when it happens. I think... So my personal interpretation of Midnight Motorist has been for a while that later that night refers to after the security puppet minigame, which means that Charlie is killed by William. William comes back home. He barges in drunk as hell, and he's trying to find Michael. I think the person on the couch is the mom. Totally valid to interpret it as Michael. I think the person on the couch is the mom or someone else. Who knows? Maybe Henry was babysitting. And I think the kid who locked the door is Michael. I think Michael locked the door and eventually broke out to go sit by the lake and think about his brother. So he's had a rough day. In my interpretation, would be weird. I think it's possible, right? Because in that case, it would be Michael ran away because of what happened. It's possible. But that would also mean that Charlotte was killed in 1983 right as the bite happened. Which, I don't know if I like Charlotte dying before the missing child incident. No, it would be before the... It would be the same day. It would be a little crazy if, like... No, because in my personal beliefs, Junior's is Fredbear's, right? I believe that Junior's is a bar that opened up after Fredbear's closed. It opened up in the same building. And if that's the case, then it couldn't have been the same day in my interpretation. So if we're going off of your interpretation, was it the bite? Well, then, the crying child couldn't have ran away. He's in a coma. So it would have to be that Michael is the runaway. Later that night could then just mean later that night after the bite. This would probably disconnect it from Charlie's death. No, because And it would have to be that Junior's isn't Fredbear's, right? You would have to... Junior's is just something else entirely. It's not Fredbear's. Fredbear's did not close down. Fredbear's is still open. And later that night, Michael ran away because of what happened, and William's pissed. That is possible and would explain why the mom is kind of like really flatly watching TV because she's still processing what happened. That is possible. I would say it's possible if you don't think that Junior's is a bar that opened up within the closed down Fredbear's. If you do think that Junior's is a bar that opened up within the closed down Fredbear's, then I don't think it's possible because Fredbear's had been closed for a long time, at least long enough to open a bar. So I guess to answer your question, it is possible depending on how you interpret this scene. If you interpret the lump to be the crying... No, the lump couldn't even be the crying child then. If you interpret the runaway to be Michael and orange guy to be William, then the gray person would probably have to be the mom, and Junior's cannot be a bar that opened up in the closed down restaurant of Fredbear's. Fredbear's would have to still be open. If so, then it's possible. I think that's a lot of asks. So I don't think it's likely, but it is possible. In my interpretation, it's not, but my interpretation isn't confirmed. It's my interpretation. So yeah, I hope that helped. Thank you for your question. I think we got time for one more. So we'll take up shopping cart, he, him. So interestingly, the main email question was about the teasers, and I already talked about that, but there was a PS, so we're going to do that. Opinions on 5 Laps at Freddy's being delayed. Yeah, I think generally it's a good thing. I've never been the type, like, I get disappointed when games get delayed. I've never been the type to think that a game being delayed is a bad thing, right? For the most part, games being delayed end up producing better games. There are definitely situations where it goes into development hell, whereas it keeps getting delayed, it passes hands, it passes development teams, miscommunication happens, it builds, and they release a messy product. That is possible. But I would rather think, this is the first delay they've announced. We got a pretty decently playable demo last year, and it was only 3 tracks and 5 racers and like 3 carts, right? So my thinking is that they released this demo, took in a lot of feedback, and said, okay, I know we wanted to release in 2025, but we got a lot of feedback and there's a lot of things we need to fix. Let's push this back a year and give us time. I think that's the logic that went into pushing back 5 Laps at Freddy's. And if that is the logic that went into pushing back 5 Laps at Freddy's, it's going to be a better game because of it. So when I hear that 5 Laps at Freddy's is getting pushed back to 2026, my main reaction was, cool, it'll be a lot better then, right? It'll be a better game that comes out next year. And I hope so. I to this day, have a lot of fun playing the demo of 5 Laps at Freddy's. I think the core gameplay there is really fun. You can get absurdly fast, and the skill ceiling is really high in that game. There are some things that need to be fixed, especially around gravity and jumping. And again, Click Team, let me playtest your game, but regardless, 5 Laps at Freddy's is, at its core, I think, really fun. So if they polish the hell out of it and give us a lot of content and multiplayer online, then I'm all in. And I think if pushing it back to 2026 is part of that, then it's part of that. But thank you for your question. We got time for one more. Let me do a shorter one. It is a shorter one. Sam, he, him, thank you for your question. I'm wondering about why MatPat, in his Ultimate Timeline video, said it was in the midst of the Great Depression when William Afton was believed as a child, basically in like 1930. If this was true, wouldn't he be 50 to 60 when Dave got bit and like 80 when he got spring-locked? Please explain. So this came out a couple years ago at this point. In case you didn't know, I actually made reaction videos, or it was less of a reaction. I made theory breakdown videos of the FNAF Ultimate Timeline that MatPat posted in his last year of posting on Game Theory. And I addressed that in the video. So the reason the Great Depression gets brought up is mainly because of the Fredbear's Sing and Show ticket. It's a really strange ticket. Fredbear's Sing and Show does evoke that like 1920s, 1930s era of entertainment. So MatPat's interpretation of it was that this is something William saw as a young child and then grew up to wanting to recreate. I've seen some people say maybe it was a family business. We don't know. This is all speculation. We have no information before like 1983 about anything that has happened. So it's all speculation. But I do think, I mentioned it in that video, the timeline isn't that messed up if this is true, right? William just needs to be alive until he gets spring-locked. That's it. He just needs to be alive until he gets spring-locked, and then age doesn't matter anymore. Once he's spring-locked, age is out of the window. Who cares? So, if we are to assume he gets spring-locked after FNAF 1, which I think is the most likely option, because, I think Follow Me takes place after FNAF 1, then this would be sometime after 1993. Or, sorry, 1993. If FNAF 1 takes place in 1993, which I think it does. So, if he was a young child in the 1930s, we can be, I'll be super generous. I'll say he was born in 1920, right? Let's just say he was born in 1920. That would mean he would just have to live to, drumroll please, at least 73, which is a completely reasonable age, right? Like, that's not even retirement age. Well, it's over retirement, but a lot of people still work until their 80s in America because our economy is fucked. But that is to say that if he was born in 1920, which is way earlier than suggested, he just had to be a kid sometime in the 20s and 30s. He could have been born in 1935 for all we matter. But he could have been born as early as 1920. And then that would just mean by the time he's creating businesses in the 80s and 70s with Henry, then he'd be like 50 or so. And wouldn't it make more sense if William is the money guy and Henry is the creative? If William is in his 50s and has this built-up wealth that he can now use, and Henry is this creator. Now, I hear you. Children become an issue here. I do hear you, because he has young children in the late 70s, early 80s. To that, I would say, he's 50. It's possible. It's a little rough. He could be 40 at this point. If he was born in 1930, then by 1970, he's 40, right? So as long as he has, a couple kids in his 40s, which is still totally possible and happens all the time, then there's no issue here. And then by the time of FNAF 1, he's like, 1930 to 1993, he's like he's at retirement age. Totally plausible. So I just want to break down that it is super possible if he was born in 1930 that he had kids in his 40s, and then, the bite of 87 happened when he's 1930 to 1987, 57. He's old, sure, but it's possible. But yeah, I guess that's my explanation. My explanation is I don't think age has ever been relevant for these conversations. I think the timeline works even if William... Hell, you could argue the timeline is possible if William was born in 1910, and no one's arguing that. The only thing that becomes an issue then is the age of his children, which, who knows? Maybe he had great swimmers. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, so I just wanted to address, I figured that's a pretty straightforward answer to give out. But thank you for your question. It's worthwhile to critique and review older theories. If you want my full thoughts on it, I do have 3 videos going over his timeline, so feel free to watch those. I'm not going to link them because I'm going to forget. But that being said, we are now at time. So if you want your questions sent on the podcast, feel free to send them into Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. It's in the description, copy and paste, because it's a pain to type out. But until next time, as always, thank you for watching the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast, where the pizza abilities are endless. We hope to enjoy your future patronage. Bye-bye for now.